The Omega Aquaterra has been one of my grail watches for a long time now, but after reviewing this watch, I kind of don't feel like I need it or want it anymore. This watch is pretty much giving me everything I would have hoped that the Aquaterra would have given me, but you can pick it up at a fraction of the price. This is a sleek, comfortable, extremely wearable, versatile sports watch. It's packed with interesting and really beautiful details that kept me picking it up day after day throughout the time I had with it. Today we're checking out the Windseeker from Tuseno. Hey guys, welcome back to Just the Watch. My name's Dave. I live in Japan and I love to collect affordable watches. And on this channel, I typically look at watches in the $500 and under price range, a lot of times focusing on watches from this side of the world. But today we're going to be jumping just a little bit above that, checking out a watch that comes in at $650, but this one is made in Switzerland by a brand that is based in Sweden. And it is one of the most beautiful, functional, and just perfect daily wear watches that I've ever seen. Now, Tuseno is a brand that was launched in Sweden back in 2015, so they've actually been around for quite a while as far as micro brands go. They even opened up their own storefront back in Sweden in 2020, and I think all of this kind of gives you a little bit more confidence when it comes to the brand. It's always nice to see at least a little bit of a track record developed. They seem to have a little bit more maturity than a lot of newer micro brands out there, which is going to give you confidence not only when it comes to getting the watch serviced. I believe this one comes with a 2-year warranty, but it also shows in the design of this watch. This is a very refined design where all of the details have been thought through very carefully. Tuseno seems to really know what they're doing when it comes to watchmaking, and they've executed it really well in this Windseeker sports watch. The inspiration for this watch is said to come from yachting, so this is something that kind of gives you a nautical feel. It does have a high level of water resistance with 100 meters of water resistance, but it's a lot more sleek, compact, and wearable than a purpose-built tool watch like a dive watch. And that versatility is going to make this a watch that's going to be a joy to wear whether you are doing something active that involves getting wet and getting in the water, or something a little bit more reserved like just going out for a nice night on the town or needing a watch to put on with a suit for business wear. Sports watches like these are one of my favorite categories of watches because of that versatility. And I think the Windseeker is an excellent example of this. The design is interesting and fresh without really being too far out there or in your face. And recently they've come out with some new colorways to the dial, now increasing your choice to 5 different colors. They sent me 2 of the dial colors to check out. One is from the first line that has a very deep, dark shade of blue that's very classic looking. And then the other is a very vibrant orange that's also beautiful. So we'll be taking a look at both of those throughout the course of this review. Now, Tuseno sent both of these watches for me to check out and review, and they gave me the option to keep whichever one I liked more, so big thanks to them for that. That is why you saw the paid promotions flag at the beginning of this review. However, other than the watch itself, I did not receive any compensation from Tuseno, nor did they have any input into the content of this review. So with that said, let's take a closer look at the Windseeker, and at the end, I'll tell you which of the 2 colorways I wound up choosing. I've really been enjoying wearing this watch and testing it out. There's so many little details that keep popping out at me that kind of keep my attention and interest and make me want to keep grabbing this one day after day. And of all the little details that are packed into here, there's 3 things that really keep jumping out at me. The first is the very interesting dial with those kind of curved lines that suggest a globe effect. The second is the bezel with its flat brushed top that's even with the flat sapphire crystal. And the third is that circular date down at 6 o'clock that I think just matches so well with the round curved lines of the watch and kind of ties everything together. And I'll talk about these elements more as we go along, but first let's talk about the size and wearability of this watch and what you're really getting here. At 39 millimeters across, this is an extremely wearable size, even for me on my 7.5-inch wrist, where I typically gravitate towards slightly larger watches. I found this one to be absolutely perfect on the wrist. At only 10.5 millimeters thick, the case is very slim and the watch is incredibly well balanced. It sits right in the spot on my wrist where I want it to and doesn't move around that much. And the case shape just has such a beautiful, gentle curve to it that perfectly conforms to my wrist. The watch comes with a very high quality bracelet that features solid links, solid end links, quick release spring bars, screw pins for adjusting the links. and a hidden butterfly style clasp that gives a very seamless look on the wrist. The bracelet perfectly matches the design of the watch, with the flat links really pairing well with that flat bezel on top, with the polished sides on the case flowing smoothly into the polished sides on the bracelet as well. The only thing I don't like about the bracelet is that there's not a lot of room for fine tuning on the size. While I love the look of that hidden butterfly style clasp, it doesn't allow for any micro adjustment, and there weren't any half links included either, which means that you may or may not be able to get the perfect fit. But I must have gotten lucky because I was able to get a really good fit on this bracelet. And I'm really happy that I did, because I think the bracelet is just such a great match to this watch. It's very comfortable on the wrist with fully articulating links, and it just has such a feeling of quality to it. Everything's very quiet. It doesn't rattle or creak or squeak. But my wrist does tend to swell sometimes, particularly in the summer when it gets hotter. And probably what I'll wind up doing if it gets too tight is swapping over to a strap, which isn't exactly ideal, but given that this watch features 20mm lugs and quick release spring bars, it's going to make it very easy to switch over to any kind of strap that you want. And it also really looks good on a large variety of straps. This is one of those incredibly versatile watches that can be either dressed up or dressed down depending on what you need it to do. If you want to give the watch a more dressy and elegant look, you can pair it up with a leather strap, or if you want to go for a more sporty and stylized look, you might go for something like the new Artem Hydroflex strap, which they sent over. This watch is going to look great on pretty much any strap that you put it on, which for me gives a lot of additional enjoyment to the watch. But in my mind, what really gives this watch longevity and makes me want to keep wearing it over and over again is all of the details. Everywhere you look on this watch, you find a lot of care and just really high quality watchmaking. The finishing on the case and bracelet is some of the best I've seen. And that might be one area where that Swiss-made label actually means something, because it does seem like the Swiss do know how to finish a watch well. The polished surfaces are sharp and clear like a mirror, and they contrast beautifully against the brush surfaces, which are bold and crisp. All of this comes together to give you some beautiful light play, with those gleaming polished surfaces really catching the light as you move the watch around. Really beautiful work there. I mentioned the bezel earlier, and that is one of my favorite things on this watch. Across the top of it is a flat, vertically brushed surface that produces a bold, round frame around the dial of the watch. And then highlighting the brush portion is an angled polish section that gives a gleaming halo effect. This style of bezel is a lot more interesting to me than the more angular bezels that you typically find in watches in this category. And I think it was just a great choice for this design. Sloping down from the bezel to the dial is a brushed silver rehaut. It has a very steep slope, allowing the dial to remain pretty large. And at each hour marker, you have the minute markings etched in very fine etching into that rehaut. And while I like the idea of those etchings there and of having the minute markers there, I think that does add a little bit of a sportiness to the watch. I think that the etching here is a little bit too fine and too small. I've found that unless the light hits it just right, I can't really read those, and they kind of just look like little scratches. You can kind of tell that something's there, but you can't tell exactly what they are. I would have preferred if those etchings were a little bit more engraved and deeper so that they could be more easily seen and recognized for what's going on there. It's kind of a small thing, but it is one of the few complaints that I have about the design of this watch. But that minor complaint aside, the dial that this rehaut reaches down to is really masterfully done, in my opinion. There's a lot of subtlety here. There's nothing really in your face about this dial. There's nothing completely original. I've seen a lot of these elements done before, but maybe never in this exact combination. And all of the dial elements come together in just a really beautiful and cohesive way. The most obvious and eye-catching detail on the dial are those curved vertical grooves that cover it. When I first saw them, it really suggested to me a globe-like pattern, calling to mind the idea of traveling around the world, which I think also fits really well with that theme of sailing or yachting. But Tuseno themselves said that this pattern is meant to call to mind the decks on the yachts that they drew inspiration from when designing this watch. Either way, it's a really beautiful pattern on this watch, and again, just really fits with the theme and design. Enhancing it even further is the fact that this is actually a sunburst dial. So when you combine that sunburst finish with those grooved lines on the dial, you wind up with a dial with just a ton of visual interest. Whichever color you wind up choosing, you're going to get a lot of different shades of that color depending on the angle that the light hits it. And when you look closely at the dial, it looks like little rays of light radiating out all over the place. And if that wasn't cool enough, when you reach the edge of the dial where they house the printed individual 60-minute markings, there's a slight drop down into a rough textured sand-like pattern, which has a little bit more of a matte effect, so it catches the light differently, and again, just creates another ring, another circle in this design. It also allows for those printed minute markers to contrast very well and to be very easily visible, which makes reading the time very easy on this watch. Hovering over this amazing dial is a beautifully cut, simple handset. The sword-shaped hour and minute hands have a beautiful bevel to them and a high polished finish that makes them look razor sharp above that dial. And while the hour and minute hands are simple and elegant and classic, I think that the arrow-shaped second hand just adds a little bit of fun to the watch, particularly on the blue dial one, where it's done with a yellow tip to the end of it. The arrow extends all the way to the edge of the dial, almost looking like it's going to scrape up against the rehaut there. And it's a real joy to watch it smoothly sweep across that dial, highlighting that higher beat rate in the Sellita SW200 automatic movement that's powering this watch. And that's a good time to talk about the movement in this watch. The Swiss-made Sellita SW200 is, I think, one of the best options for an affordable Swiss-made watch. The Sellita SW200 is a clone of the legendary ETA 2824 automatic movement, and Sellita is generally considered to be on par with ETA in the manufacture of this movement. It's one of the most widely used movements in the Swiss watch industry. It's used not only in micro brands, but in major brands, which means that when you eventually need to get this watch serviced, pretty much any watchmaker will be familiar with the workings of this movement and able to offer you the support that you need. And it's also well regarded as an accurate, high-quality movement and a slightly premium choice over entry-level Japanese automatic movements like the Seiko NH35 or even the Miyota 9000 series movements. And interfacing with this movement is a real joy with the crown that Tuseno has implemented here. This is an oversized screw-down crown that just has a very smooth and satisfying feel to it. The size makes it very easy to grip, so threading and unthreading the crown from the case is very easy, and then when you do get to the winding does feel very smooth. And adjusting both the time and date is very easy. Each position on the crown is very clearly discerned with very positive feedback and solid clicks, so I had no problem differentiating the date setting position from the time setting position. And on top of that, the crown is also signed with a very detailed embossing of Tuseno's star logo, which is always really cool to see. Now, let's talk about the After Dark performance of this watch because it does feature Swiss Superluminova BGW9 to give it a nice, cool, crisp blue glow in the dark. Putting this through my Lume scoring system, it fared pretty well for a sports watch like this, getting a 7 on my J-score test. This means that it's not going to perform the same as a high-powered dive watch, but it's still doing a really good job for a field watch or a sports watch with very bright initial performance and still decent legibility after an hour or so in the dark. That said, the lume strip on the hands is fairly thin, so that's not going to hold on all night long. But again, pretty good lume for this category of watch. Overall, I've really kind of fallen in love with this watch. It's kind of my ideal daily wear. And while it wasn't easy to find faults with it, there were a few things I would like to see changed. First off, there was one obvious quality control issue, but not with the watch itself, with the packaging that the watch came in. I received both of these watches from Tuseno in a pretty nice branded Tuseno watch roll. However, upon removing one of the pillows from the watch, the glue came undone and the side of the pillow broke off. So that was a little bit unfortunate. And also surprising because other than that, the watch roll looked pretty high quality. So it's always kind of a bummer when something like that happens, but we got to mention it. As far as changes to the watch itself, I would have liked to have seen some more adjustment on the bracelet. This is kind of a hard one because I think that butterfly style clasp does really work with this watch. It gives it a more sleek and refined look that if you had a more sports oriented clasp with more adjustment, you would lose a little bit of that. Even still, I tend to value a good fit over the aesthetics, but that's also kind of a personal choice as well. Also, as mentioned before, I think that the etchings on the rehaut should have been deeper and bolder, maybe more of an engraving instead of kind of just being finely scratched in there. Not only would that make them more legible, I think it would give the watch a more premium look. As it is, to me, I think they're kind of more of a minor distraction to the overall design of the watch rather than an enhancement to it. I like the idea, just not necessarily the execution. And the final thing I would have liked to have seen improved here is maybe some kind of scratch-resistant coating on the surface of the watch. The finishing is absolutely beautiful, but it is a little bit on the fragile side. It might be because I found myself wearing this watch a lot more than I usually do on review pieces, but I did find myself picking up a lot more scratches more quickly than I do on other watches that I've reviewed. So something to harden that finishing a little bit, I think would also be really helpful. But those minor complaints aside, I really love this watch, and it's one I can definitely see myself keeping around for a long time. So that wraps up the review of this watch. I decided to go with the dark blue one just because I think that one was such a beautiful colorway, and I think that that's going to give me more wear and versatility. That watch has quickly become one of, if not my favorite daily wear watches in my collection. The orange one is spectacular. I love that one. My wife did not, and I think I just, because of that bright colorway, it would probably limit the times that I personally would wear it. But I love that Tuseno is giving you these options between more classic and reserved colors and more fun, fresh, and kind of out there colors as well. Drop me a comment down below. Let me know which of the two you prefer. Always love to hear from you guys. Give me your thoughts and opinions on this watch. And if you have any questions, I'll try and answer those as well. Also, if you're interested in getting some watch-themed t-shirts like this one here, you can pick it up on my website at justthewatch.com. That's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.